Hello, and welcome to part 2 of my series on the evolutions of Ravnica's guilds. If you found my channel through the last video in this series, welcome, and thank you for helping make it my most watched ever. If you haven't seen that video, it will be linked at the end. White people at music festivals. Gruul. In their first appearance, the Gruul are written with both sympathy and understanding. One article makes sure to stress that they are neither fools nor wild animals. They are exploited, downtrodden, disenfranchised, and brushed aside. They have a legitimate cause that they fight for. The Selesnya and Simic stole their purpose, and in the Selesnya's case, their land. The Azorius refused to recognize them, while the Boros beat down on them, and the Orzhov enslaved them. They are barely a guild, a loose assemblage of beggars, gangs, and raiding parties, held together only by the strength of select individuals. This weak position is shown elsewhere. For example, multiple cards present more stealthy and skulking Gruul members. Not everyone can afford to face danger head-on. Their plight is not super clear from the cards themselves, which can be easily read as generically violent. Gruul Warplow stands out as an example of early installment weirdness, a form of complex technology that is very out of place with what the guild would come to represent. The second appearance of the Gruul is a little less nuanced. They're often depicted with inherent mindless violence. It's mentioned in passing that they're disenfranchised, but a general dislike of cities and just wanting an excuse to smash things are also given as reasons for their way of life. We also see a greater emphasis on internal fighting within the guild. It's said to be constant and almost ritualistic. Ironically, for perhaps the worst positioned guild, the Gruul are said to greatly value the idea that only the strong should survive and rule. Finally, in a nice bit of foreshadowing, it's mentioned that Borborygmos is aging, with his de facto leadership of the Gruul precarious due to ever-increasing challenges. One article from the third Ravnica block is interesting in how it contextualizes the guild. It starts with broken sentences in all caps about how much the Gruul love violence and hate the city. It then switches over to talk about the tragedy of the Gruul's situation. It reaffirms their origin given in the first block, and points out the oversimplification of their story that is often presented. It's also fitting as a preview of the guild we will receive in that block. They are at a fever pitch, believing more than ever before that the apocalyptic end raise is imminent. Encouraged by new leadership, they are riled up and ready for change. We are yet to see how things turned out after the War of the Spark, with Borborygmos back in charge, and their religious reckoning having fallen apart. This block also had a nice callback to the sneakier members from the first block. Mechanics. A creature with Bloodthirst enters the battlefield with N+1/+1 counters if an opponent was dealt damage that turn. Blood Rush is an ability ward that appears on creatures and allows you to discard the card and pay a cost to give another creature a stats boost, and in some cases, another ability. Riot is a Q ward that allows you to choose between a +1/+1 counter and haste when the creature enters the battlefield. The Gruul have great mechanical cohesion. Every Q ward helps your creatures attack better. All three give at least the option of making your creature bigger. This is very fitting for a guild that values strength in physical combat. Art. The artistic style of the Gruul has not changed too much. The outfits and actions remain consistent across the years. The first block had a lot of simplistic or even blank backgrounds. The second visit would change its direction up a lot, to the extent that certain cards are difficult to make out because there are so many shadow and background details. The third block would find a balance between detail and legibility. In their first appearance, an article mentions that unlike the Selesnya, the Gruul don't put shiny armor on their animals. This detail remains true across all versions. The Gruel Symbol, more accurately the Burning Tree clan symbol, became straightened and sharper in Return to Ravnica. The art team stated that they wanted something more tribal, something that can be scratched and smeared onto surfaces as a territorial warning. That said, I wouldn't expect the Gruul to have a consistent, neat symbol, and their signet's flavor text can be interpreted as saying as much. Creatures. The Gruul are very diverse, both in terms of all creature types and for types that appear in every visit. Almost every species associated with the wilderness shows up here. 18 species have been represented in the guild, of which Viashino, goblins, worms, centaurs, beasts, humans, giants, and boars have appeared every time. Jonestown. Role. The first appearance of the Selesnya places the most emphasis on the religious side of the guild. There is an element of traditional Abrahamic religion, with talk of righteousness, banishing evil, and battling against the darkness, as well as depictions of demons being destroyed. There are also a lot of signs that they're both a cult and a danger to outsiders. Members are stripped of their individual identities and directed to cut off ties with all family and friends, then added to the Selesnya war machine. Their leader, Matt Selesnya, and their representatives are regarded as infallible. Non-believers are blinded in their presence. There's ominous talk of pruning Ravnicans who don't conform. The Quiet Men, silent, floating, white-robed entities, kill enemies of the guild. There's also a noted clash of nature versus civilization within the guild, to an extent not seen in later visits. On one hand, their military is very structured, with fancy armor and domesticated animals. On the other hand, it's stated that they, not the Gruul, created the rubble belt. A lot of their flavor text speaks with anger towards the unnatural city elements of Ravnica, but they also stand in contrast to two of their fellow nature guilds, the Golgari and the Gruul, due to their civilized style of agriculture, domestication, and development. Some might call them hypocrites. I am some. They're hypocrites. I am unsure if this interpretation is intended, though. The second appearance of the Selesnya slides closer to the military end of the guild's military-religion spectrum. The religious element is certainly there, but more of an emphasis is now placed on their army and penchant for supposedly justified violence. The cult dynamic and a lot of the specifics of their beliefs are downplayed, but it is said in no uncertain words that they will kill and die for the cause. They even use their members as living shields. They also developed a victim complex, which did not help endear them to me. They're now more unified, a combination of both nature and civilization, without as much internal conflict between the two ideals. Their third appearance reaches a medium between the more religious first century and the more militarized second. Both focuses receive an equal amount of attention, and the conflict between them is given center stage. The guild's three-bodied dryad leader is in discord between the two to represent this. It's said that the guild is growing their army, but this isn't especially apparent compared to the second block. The cultish tendencies of their faith are almost entirely removed, with them now a fairly bland peace and love religion, though still contrasted with their militarism. Mechanics. Selesnya is the first guild we've seen to repeat a mechanic, utilizing Convoke in both their first and third appearances. Spells with Convoke can be paid for by tapping creatures you control. Their other mechanic, Populate, creates a token that's a copy of a creature token you control. The mechanics are nicely cohesive, both encouraging you to go wide. This captures the expansive, community-based ideals of the guild well. Art. The artistic depiction of the Selesnya has remained fairly consistent, their symbol barely changed between blocks. Much of their art continues to have warm lighting and coloring. In terms of differences, the art team worked to represent them as bigger and broader in the second block. Additionally, they lose the fantasy bikinis that some of their members wear in the first block. Finally, their first appearance also had a handful of terribly drawn cards. Thankfully, the other two would not continue this trend. Creatures. The Selesnya have one of the more consistent creature type rosters that we've seen so far. Ironically, for a guild that attempts to expand aggressively and claims to welcome everyone, they only have 5 sapient races in their ranks, fewer than many of the other guilds. Additionally, only 2 new creature types were added after the first visit. Elementals, dryads, worms, elephants, elves, and centaurs appear in every visit. The Selesnya are also unique in that they're the first guild we've seen to have an appearance with no humans. The most dramatic shift in the guild is the complete absence of saplings after the first block, where they appeared in great number. They were replaced by more physically imposing tokens. Honestly, one of the hardest hitting satires of the Catholic Church that I've seen in popular fiction, and a pretty good critique of capitalism too. Role. In all of their iterations, the Orzhov have 3 identities: church, bank, and criminal organization. However, the ratio to which each is emphasized has shifted over time. In their first appearance, they are church first, money manager second, criminals third. In addition to being a corrupt church, there are also a lot of cards that depict them as a creepy church, with no mention of money. Relatedly, they have cards showing them as generally weird, with no religious context. They're also keeping the big picture in mind, focusing on more than just financial greed. They're stated to be entirely committed to the establishment and maintenance of a power structure in Ravnica. They also claim to have no need for military might. They utilize capital of various forms instead. One set of flavor text claims that carrying the Orzhov sigil on a medallion is a sign of rank. In another example of early installment weirdness, a thrall is shown with a position in the church, serving as a cleric. All later Orzhov thralls are classless and perform manual or stationary labor. The second block increases the Orzhov's focus on money. They're now fully characterized as a corrupt church, as opposed to a church that, among other things, happens to be corrupt. There's another line about how important structure is to them, as the guild was founded on the belief that wealth is power, that structure breeds wealth, and that guilt creates structure. There's a lot of emphasis on their eternal long game as well. Interestingly, one source states that some believe Teysa is the real power behind the guild, which isn't super in line with our depiction in the next visit. There's an effort now to explain the Orzhov point of view, with it claimed that many Orzhov guild members truly believe that their rule is necessary for making Ravnica the best it can be. It's even said that they, not the Azorius or Boros, are, for all practical purposes, law in Ravnica. They now rely on physical might to a much greater degree than they claimed to last time. They're also getting out of the cathedral a lot more. Instead of waiting for the public to come to them, they're going out to the public, with big maces. Finally, sigil medallions have gone from being exclusive to masters to appearing on pets. The third block increases the mob elements of the guild. There aren't many businesses on Ravnica that aren't either run by or in debt to the Orzhov, and the syndicate's push into organized crime is only becoming more brazen. One facet of this is a rise in protection rackets, stated in-universe to be a result of instability in the market. Is this a Bitcoin? Another in-universe factor in their shift is the internal crisis caused by Kaya releasing many of those in debt to the guild. Beyond that, certain trends from the second block, such as militarism and medallioned pets, are continued. Like some of the other guilds discussed in this series, their future is very much up in the air. Mechanics. With Haunt, you exile a card after it dies or resolves attached to another creature. When that creature dies, you get an effect. It's very unintuitive, and Mark Rosewater seems to really regret it. You could almost say it haunts him. Extort is a keyword that lets you pay 1 white or black mana whenever you cast a spell to drain 1 life from each opponent. When a creature with Afterlife dies, you create 1/1 spirit tokens with flying. Each mechanic is successfully flavorful, though they cover 2 distinct elements of the guild. Haunt and Aftermath capture the guild's propensity for ghostliness well, while Extort captures their criminal materialistic side. Together, each contributes to a strategy of bleeding the opponent out with lots of small hits. Art. As mentioned previously, the Orzhov started going outside more in their second appearance. Partially for this reason, they get more cards with brighter art. This was dialed back slightly in the third block. Similar to the Rakdos in the last video, they also started off more surreal and abstract than they would end up. Their dress also got more ostentatious over time. While their leaders always dressed like MC Hammer, now their fighters, middlemen, laborers, and even animals do too. Their symbol had minimal change. Creatures. The Orzhov have a fairly conservative species makeup. Thralls, humans, spirits, and angels appear in every set. Interestingly, vampires, now fairly synonymous with the guild, didn't appear until the second block. Inversely, gargoyles are fairly present in the first block, appearing at about the same rate as the thralls. They fall off the map in favor of said thralls, who play a similar role. Relatedly, a bird takes the position bats usually do in Block 3. Thank you for watching. Once again, please let me know any questions you have about the video or the guilds, and I'll answer it in the series conclusion. Let me know how you feel about these guilds and how they've changed too. Finally, please consider liking and subscribing to help my channel grow.